surfnvs.com is where you can grab your NVS fins, the C drives that we always hype and talk about, custom templates. They made me a set of quad fins for my Simon Shapes asymmetrical board. So incredible customer service, incredible quality.
Heck yeah. And you know where NVS Fins is going to be? They're going to be at the boardroom. They've got an incredibly robust and large booth right next to the shaping bays. So you'll be able to meet Jamin and Leif at the Boardroom International Surfboard Show, which is presented by US Blanks, by the way, my great friends and sponsors of the show. And so come out and meet those guys and check out the whole line of NVS fins. I'm sure they'll have some special fins. You can talk to them. I often get questions about the C drive fins, so I'm sure that they will engage with you about the benefits of those fins if I haven't done a good job of that already. So yeah, NVS fins, huge fans. Thanks for sponsoring the show and this show.
They do a great job at the Boardroom Show. So I'm glad that they're going to be there again. I was just on their website too, and they have the top banner on the page is you can mix and match your C drive setups. So they come in quad, twin or thrusters, variations of, but you can, and then they have different sizes, medium, large. So you can actually grab like 2 large side fins with 1 small back fin, and they have them just priced as individual fins rather than a set. So that's kind of a cool thing too, because I find sometimes with 3 large fins, you have too much drive and not enough maneuverability. But if you want to put a smaller fin in the back, you can kind of make that adjustment on your own. So go to surfnvs.com to check it out. Of course, come to the Boardroom Show to meet them in person. And then driftline.co, promo code SPIT will save you 15% on a pair of drifties.
Well, look, you and I wore our drifties in El Salvador. I'm leaving on a trip soon for another warm location. And I've been going through my, what I'm going to pack, my list of things. And of course, I don't even have to put drifties on my list. It's just a no-brainer. It'd be like putting wax on your list. Of course, you're bringing your drifties, and of course, you're bringing wax. And I'm excited about sporting my drifties again in the warm climes of another surf trip.
Yeah, so drifties are a patented neoprene lined board short. It's just 0.5 millimeter of neoprene sewn into the modern technical 4-way stretch, fast drying board short. So they're stylish on the outside. You can't even tell that there's anything underneath, but it is just a little bit of compression, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of comfort. But
there is nothing underneath.
It's better than being naked underneath, in fact, because it keeps everything in place, keeps a little bit of protection and a little bit of warmth. So driftline.co, promo code SPIT.
As we see some movement at the takeoff zone, it's Kelly Slater grabbing rail.
Yeah, guy. Holy crap. Guy, there's a lot going on. This is Spit. This is the Surf Talk Show podcast. David Lee Scales, Scott Bass, we're here talking surf with you. And we're excited. We've got I think a fairly robust show here today. It is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. Good morning, David Lee Scales, dear citizen.
Good morning, Scott Bass, falling all over your guys, stumbling over the guys. Surf show, surf podcast, now vlog as well. We're on YouTube, everybody. Come check us out. You can watch Scott chat with Bob McTavish on YouTube. Pretty incredible.
Yeah. Look, we got a lot going on. David's got insane content on his site. Just like a never-ending plethora of incredible guests. You had Shane Horan, you had Sam Hammer. I've got Bob McTavish. And so there's a lot, and there's a lot of great, this is interesting because there's a lot of great podcasts out there, and they keep showing up, and there's more and more good ones, and people keep telling me about good ones. And your network has quite a few. And look, there's a lot.
What's interesting to me is I just kind of keep my head down and focus on generating content. And I don't really certainly don't think about advertising, but sometimes get around to Instagramming it out, sometimes don't, just kind of publish, And now that we're publishing on YouTube, the comment that I see more frequent than anything is just, this is great content. I didn't know you guys existed. We've been doing this for over 10 years. They didn't know we existed. There was just a certain segment of people who listen to podcasts, and then there's plenty who don't. And then there's some people who are into surfing, and whatever that overlap is of into surfing, listen to podcasts, they had probably found us. But they could be very much into surfing, just don't listen to podcasts. And there was no way for them to find us because we were audio only. And so just publishing on YouTube, it feels like if there's 30% of the population that listen to podcasts, there's, I'd say 80 to 90% who actually go onto YouTube with any regularity. And so there's just, it's a bigger platform. There's more people there. And so we're starting to access a new audience after a decade.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, it almost feels like we're fresh, we're new, and we need to sort of explain some of our positions or explain where we came from. Like, we just assume that everyone that listens to us on like Apple or Spotify knows our backstory and knows the history
Yeah.
and knows, and people that are on YouTube are like, who are these two dudes?
Exactly. But you did publish the Bob McTavish chat. How did that go?
I thought it went great. It was very, I always enjoyed listening to legends of the sport. And I just tried to sit back and tee up some questions for him. And he's obviously energetic and has a lot to say. And frankly, we're going to do another one. I mean, afterwards, you know, Bob was like, Scott, we didn't even get to this,
Right.
this, and this. And I was like, good. Let's circle back in August and do another one to prime people up for the boardroom show. And so we'll have part 2 of Bob McTavish coming up later in the summer.
Cool. Any big takeaways or new insights that you didn't know before?
I think the funnest thing was sort of the opening questioning, which was like, I wanted to know, I like when I do podcasts, I'm like, well, what was it like? And like, you know, like set the scene for me, you know, like there must've been a time when the very first time you met George Greeno, what happened?
Right.
How did that go? The very first time you saw him surf. So I think the fun takeaway was when, you know, the sander came into the room while Bob was shaping. He was like, Bob, you've got to come see this. Come across the street. They went across the street and George Greeno is just going bang, bang, ripping roundhouses, bang. And those guys are like, I mean, for you and I, and for the listening audience for the past 50 years or whatever, we know what high quality performance surfing looks like. And this was the first time. I mean, this was like, holy shit, this went from black and white to color, you know, like that. And they're all like, how do we do that on our 9-foot 9.6s? And that's where the germination for the shortboard revolution set into place. And then I think the other big takeaway was when Bob was like, look, the first really good board that I made was here in California in Santa Barbara at the Rennie Yater and the Maury Pope shop. Like that's where I dialed it into a place where it's like, okay, we've got it now. And that board actually is still produced by those guys. It's called the Rincon model. And that's the one where, like I say, they took out all the craziness of the V bottom. They straightened things out. They just got, you know, they took all the extremes away from the design and they're like, okay, this is actually insane. And so to him, like the really first good shortboard was made in Santa Barbara.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. I mean, we're so lucky to have such early pioneers still around. And then that kind of lucid and engaged to be, and just being able to remember the stories from that long ago.
He remembers everything. Yeah, it's good.
I'm always blown away by older people who have that sharp of recall, like Dick Metz, you know?
I know. I love that. It gives me
just
hope.
calling out. Well, part of me thinks it's all BS, you know, when Dick's just literally like, because who could question whether or not he's accurate in his recall? But he's not. It's not BS because he'll get enough of it precisely right, like to the year. And I can go back and research some things. And I'm like, how in the world did he know that? You know?
Yeah.
So unique. Well, anybody who wants to listen to that show, they can do it on any podcast platform or, like I said, on YouTube. I recorded an episode. I'm going to publish it later today with Josh Martin.
Yes.
Who I've had on the podcast twice before, but the first time was 10 years ago and the second time was 5 years ago. And I just love talking to him. He's such a great guy to chat with, you know, and he's such a skilled craftsman and like MacGyver, like can just use whatever is around to create the tools and the parts to fix anything that he needs to fix.
Yeah, yeah. So that's funny. I was, when you were talking, I was just looking on YouTube, because what I've been doing is sending our guy Chad, who handles our YouTube stuff, old podcasts. I'm wondering, have you been doing that?
No,
Because
I
I'm
can barely
sending,
keep I can barely keep up with a weekly.
yeah. So I've got plenty of time. Like, I'm not doing as many as you. So I'm like, hey, I've got these ones from like 3 years ago that I actually recorded during COVID, and I have the video. Let's put them up there, And so
Amazing.
he's putting some of the, but I missed what you said. I was so focused on my
Well,
thing. What were you saying there? I
So
apologize.
Josh
Oh yeah,
Martin.
Josh Martin. Yes.
So I show up at Josh Martin's house, and he's got a truck up on stands with all four wheels off, and he's like tinkering. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, brakes, suspension, truck's getting new wheels." And I'm like, "Do you know, like, how do you know how to do all that?" He's like, "I don't know. I've done a little bit of it here and there." And I'm like, "Did you learn? Like, how do you learn this stuff?" And he's like, "I don't know. Like, there's no way I'm going to go pay somebody to do this. So I'm just going to figure it out?" And then he's like, "I'll tell you what, there's a couple things," because he does Baja trips all the time, and it's like extended trips. He's camping on all of them. He goes, "Always keep ratchet straps with you. Always keep, there was like this list of things, zip ties, like a few things." He goes, "I was in a situation," because you can bring a set of tools. Everybody thinks bring a set of tools, but what you may not have access to are parts. But he's like, "There's this list of 10 things that can kind of double as most car parts." And so, I was in a situation in Baja once, way out in the middle of nowhere, and the suspension, something broke, and ratchet straps. He just ratchet strapped the whatever suspension together, and he drove another 800 miles on it, and it worked perfectly fine. It was strong enough to do the job, but also flexible enough to kind of allow things to move so that nothing would actually snap. And so he just has tons of stories like that where it's just, I would die out there. I would be completely unable to save myself and my family, and we would die in the desert. And so I just love hearing
Well,
stories like that
let me
from him.
say this. First of all, I think when your back's pushed towards the wall, you will find a way. Like, you surprise yourself.
Sure.
Um, but I agree with you. I'm the same way. I'm like, oh my God, where's AAA? And those kinds of people amaze me. And I know a lot of people like that. And I know you do too. Those types of people that are just like, I'm just going to take it apart and figure it out.
Mhm.
And it's funny. I'm reading a book. I'm actually going to be interviewing Liz Clark, the gal that sailed, to the South Pacific by herself or with, some other, but she basically learned how to sail. Well, she knew how to sail, but she had to learn how to kind of do all of the stuff. There's a difference between jumping on a sailboat and lifting up the mainsail and actually like having to deal with the autopilot and the wiring and the water pump and the bilge and all this stuff. And so she's like that. Like, she just kind of learned by getting in there, and doing it. And so I'm fascinated by those people like Josh Martin that can do that, he just seems like one of those guys. There's certain guys, and we all know him, like I said, and they just
Well,
they know how to work with tools.
yeah, I mean, but how empowering would that feel to just know you don't need any money? You don't need to get on Amazon and have the tool delivered tomorrow or the part delivered next week or whatever. Like, you could just figure it out from what's around you. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
it's amazing. I mean, if I can like figure out how to use a Phillips head screwdriver, I'm like running around the house going, "Look at me!"
Change the light bulb, honey.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, speaking of Liz Clark, obviously Torrin Martin and his partner, Ayana, published that film earlier in the year, Calypti, or I guess last year.
yeah,
Calypti just hit 1 million views on YouTube, believe it or not.
yeah. Super cool movie. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
I just thought that was kind of a landmark because you don't see that happen very often with surf films on YouTube. So congrats to them on that.
Yeah, good stuff. Love it.
Well, what do you got on your surf news
Let's see.
talking
I've got a
points?
couple of things. The one thing which is kind of, I think the lead thing here is, believe it or not, I think it's Maps to Nowhere.
Oh my gosh. This was my must see moment presented by Treeswax, treeswax.com, of course, the only petroleum free surf wax. But holy cow, season 2, episode 3.
Yeah, what an incredible, um, it kind of had all of the right elements that built up to a great segment, which was there was some sincere and underlying anxiety that they might not score waves. Like there was like for the first time in this, the series isn't that long, but Matt, the guy who kind of is the guy who drives the series, Matt Rode, he wasn't sure if there were, like it looked like there was going to be waves and
Well,
there was swell coming. Yeah, go ahead.
let me set it up even prior to this episode. Maps to Nowhere is presented by Surfline and O'Neill. So it's kind of O'Neill Team Riders. It's a travel video series. Goes on YouTube, but Surfline is behind it. And so it's always Matt Rode is an adventurer and he's getting on using forecasting and trying to find new spots. So it's called Maps to Nowhere because they're not going to tell you where they're going, but it's the ultimate surf. It's the classic surf adventure story set to film as a recurring series. And so his thing is, let's find kind of a once in a, decade swell, aiming for somewhere that we know could potentially have waves, but is uncharted and unsurfed before. We're going to find a new surf spot, but it's a swell that really like is, once in a couple of years swell. And so he finds these new spots and they give you just enough information to kind of hint at a part of the world based on the time of year and the direction of the swell, but it's very, very hard to identify. And so this particular spot that he like finds on the map, essentially, they don't think anybody's ever surfed it before. And so that leads into what you're talking about is you get a crew together and it's a strike mission. It's not 6 months from now. It's like, hey, Caitlin Simmers and Soli Bailey and Caitlin's younger brother, Timo, like, or maybe older brother. I'm not sure if he's older or younger, but we're going to do a strike mission for this next week and go down and try to score this spot. But those people, Caitlin's on world tour, like they have other obligations. So it's a gamble to go spend that amount of time, but they get there. And that leads into what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so, they're at this location. And so and it doesn't look good. At first it's like, oh yeah, we know the swell's coming, but this spot, it's walled, it's 2 feet and walled and breaking right on the sand. And as as this episode sort of progresses, it gets better and better. The swell fills in, the sand changes, the point actually forms, and they just score out of their brains. And you guys, everybody listening, if you haven't already, I'm sure that 90% of the people have already seen it. You need to go see it because it's just mind blowing. How hard of a wave that is to surf. You have to be like an expert level surfer to even have a chance out there. And then to watch as all of them, but specifically Caitlin Simmers, sort of adapts and changes and figures it out. And I mean, they're getting there's so many incredible rides, wave after wave after wave after wave, that at some point you're like it loses some of its incredibleness. You know what I mean? Like if it was just a 1 hour where it erupted and it happened and then it deteriorated to crap and that was it, you might feel more like, wow, they really scored. Whereas this is like 5 days of just barreling, piping right-handers, spit after spit, kind of wave you have to continually drive and set your rail. And Katie Simmers really engaging, like just, boom, boom, just like weaving through the tube. They're weaving through the tube. You have to turn through the tube to make this wave. It's incredible.
It's unbelievable. This is the craziest wave that I've seen somebody catch or, find in a very, very long time. It's like a world class wave. And what was interesting to me is seeing the spot develop. Like you said, the point form, like they're out there, they don't cut any of that footage out of when it wasn't good. Like they show you to make it more impactful when it actually turns on. But the first few days, it's a totally different beach. But when that massive swell hits, the swell of multiple years, like I said, it sucks all the sand off the beach and then creates kind of a dredge in the sandbar itself, kind of a gutter, let's say. So it's going from deep water and hitting that shallow sand and developing a wave, but then hitting a gutter that allows the wave to kind of run down the beach. And so a point kind of forms and you can see it all happen over the course of a couple of days. And the day before the swell really develops, Caitlin's even saying like, we got skunked. I'm going home. I was ready to ask them to book me a flight home because this was a total loss. And then it gets good and they get some 20-second tube rides. But then the next day, it really gets good. And it's like, it was double overhead and double as wide as it was tall. And like you said, going full speed, pumping through sections. And it was just like, I mean, when you're going full speed and pumping the entire time for 20 seconds, it's just takes an incredible amount of navigation and skill. It was really a world-class, crazy, crazy wave.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people that watch this thought about Skeleton Bay, thought about the left, and how does this right compare to that left? That's what I at one point I was like, okay, this is kind of like the left at Skeleton Bay.
Skeleton Bay is longer.
Longer, yeah. So give me your thoughts. I agree. This is more fickle. It's not quite as perfect as Skeleton Bay, but it's the right-hand version of, it's the closest thing I think to Skeleton Bay that we've seen.
I mean, this is, I hate to say, a more technical wave. It's a more intense wave, I would say. As it's shorter than Skeleton Bay, but it's still incredibly long. And it's just, there is no room for error at all. Like there's sections on Skeleton where the barrel lets up and, I don't know, you can get out in front of it. This is just
Yeah,
like
in the Skeleton Bay, there's times when they're going out into the flats and kind of kick stalling and waiting for it to catch up.
This is all intensity. This is backdoor, but 300 to 500 yards long is what it looked like.
Yeah.
So um it's it is this episode, this series is kind of one of the better things going on the internet right now in terms of surf series. So I really got to applaud. We've pointed to it a couple of times for various things over the last year or two, but this is the best episode that they've produced. This is the best score that they always score, or they don't always score, but on a lot of the episodes they do score and they get great waves and there's great surfing. This is on a whole different level. This is like a find of finds. And I would go a step beyond that and just say this was a uh, cornerstone performance by Caitlin Simmers. This is a moment where forget about gender. Like we can say this is the best surfing done by a female surfer. Like this is the best barrel riding I've ever seen by a female surfer. This is the best surfing I've ever seen by a female surfer. Those things are true. But what else is true is that this is some of the best tube riding I've ever seen by a 16-year-old, full stop, period. Like doesn't matter male, female, anything. Like this is the best tube riding I've ever seen by someone of that age.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, and I'm sure that most of the listeners are going to go rewatch it. It's insane. Of course, the one thing that always is thrown out during the series is where is this spot? And there's little hints. You can see the architecture and the color of the homes, and there's some landscape that it's dry, it's kind of arid. There's not a lot of palm trees. Like I believe me, I was on Google Earth yesterday going, and then they throw this image of Matt early on in the bit where he's looking at the swell energy, and that's to throw you off. It's like they're looking at Central America and stuff, and so it can't be there because they wouldn't do that. It's got to be somewhere. That's another hint, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's even if we go against the ideal by you and I trying to figure out where it is, or we just leave it and just don't talk about where we think it is.
I'd be curious to hear where you think it is off air.
Do you know where it is off air?
No.
No. Okay, I'll tell you where I think it is off air, but that's so mean to the listeners.
The listener understands it would be not cool.
It's blasphemous.
Out him.
Yeah, we can't be those guys.
Yeah.
I know there are those sleuths online that are throwing stuff out there, which is kind of, it's not right.
Look, back to the surfing itself. Obviously, Caitlin Simmers becomes the showstopper, but her brother, I've never seen before, Timo, surfs incredibly.
Yeah, no, for sure. I didn't even till halfway through. I was like, oh, that's her brother. I just thought it was some kid that just happened to have the same. I didn't make the connection until later. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's surfing great.
And Soli Bailey, he's incredible too. I mean, I've always felt like he has cool style and stuff, but his surfing is top notch. He's put out enough clips. I think he was at Cloudbreak earlier this year when that was massive.
Oh yeah.
And so he's just really on a roll. So epic to see him too.
Yeah, there was some mention about Stab Surfer of the Year, and that perhaps he's in the running or is already the front runner for Stab Surfer of the Year based on Cloudbreak and this. And that's a pretty good argument, hard one to beat right now.
Yeah. I mean, congrats to everybody involved with this series because, like I said, this is season 2, episode 3, and they've committed to the, to the concept and to the journey, and it's not cheap to produce these things. They're traveling around the world, and what a great concept. Employ like to reach out. I didn't know who Matt Road was prior, but to reach out to somebody like Matt Road, just be like, hey, we're going to let you guide the ship. We're going to help you find waves and commit to it for a couple of years is kind of an incredible thing.
You know, it's funny. So I geek out on Google Earth like a lot of people. And, there's some areas, obviously they're all over the place, but I always kind of go to the Indian Ocean and then I go off to I guess would be the West where like Somalia is, and kind of like from Sri Lanka. And then you just go over to Africa there and you just kind of look at that East coast of Africa and you're like, and there's like a little island that pops up off of Somalia or something. And you just start scouring, and it's not a sexy place to visit, but if you're trying to hunt down an empty wave, there could be potential there. There's so much coastline there that's off limits because of the political situation.
Look, you don't even need to get on a plane. There's plenty of spots, even from here on the East Coast, that it just takes time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you just have to be able to commit to finding the spot. And then it turns out, you know what, this isn't the right day, but this has potential. I need to come back when the conditions provide this or that. So if you have time, you can find them. They're still out there. And that's what's so great about this series. It's just a simple, the oldest concept in surfing is just, we're going to get out there and find great waves.
And one of the cool things too is that we just touched on is this sort of ethos of not talking about the location. And what I'm getting at is maybe this ethos spreads a little wider, maybe because this was an ethos that existed in surf culture for sure in the 70s, and it sort of got blown out, I guess probably most recently when everyone's just like, everyone's got a camera anyway, so it's free game, everyone's got a phone. Those days of not talking about spots are over. And maybe that ethos is going to be reestablished a little bit through this series. And I think it already has on some level.
Which is funny because Surfline is behind it.
Yeah, there's
Surfline's the one with Surfline's the one with cameras blasting what's going on everywhere at all times. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. Good work, Surfline and O'Neill. And it's going to be hard to beat that one. You know what I mean?
Totally agree. But man, like I said, I feel like this is a nexus, kind of a turning point where what we saw from Caitlin is kind of like, man, where do we go from here? That was unbelievable.
Yeah, I was putting my fantasy surf team together on the WSL's website, and it's a Chopu here in about a week or whatever, and I'm like, Caitlin Simmons, she's going on my team no matter what, man.
No matter what. Yeah, for sure. And look, Chopu went Richter yesterday.
Yeah, I know. It's been 15 to 18. It's been crazy.
Yeah, I haven't seen any surf websites publish any features on this yet, but Ryan Miller, surf photographer Ryan Miller, was there and documenting a lot of it. And I saw Baron or Ballroom Stack was out, Matahi Drole, obviously the Tahitian crew, Matahi, Kaiuli Vost, Tatiana Weston-Webb on the women's side was right there charging and prepping for the event.
Oh.
Another surfer back in action is Kala Grace. I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, Kala Grace had a horrific wipeout at Pipeline where suffered a concussion, was in the hospital for an extended period of time, kind of unsure whether or not he would even be able to surf again. Well, he's back at it full speed at Chopu when it's going nuts. So pretty epic stuff coming out of Chopu.
Yeah, look, that's event. It's pumping again today. It's not quite obviously not light out, but that event starts on the 22nd, which is basically a week from today. And the forecast looks really good. And it jumped quite a bit from when I looked at it last. So there's days of 8 to 12 feet. There's days of 10 to 15 feet in the forecast waiting period from the 22nd to the 31st. For instance, and again, this is Surfline. These things are going to get cut in half usually, because we're talking 2 weeks out. But 2 weeks from today, it's 10 to 15 feet, which it wasn't like that yesterday, which means they spotted some low pressures on the, in the forecast. So it'll be interesting, and I'm excited about it. And one of the things about this event, and I kind of touched on it a little bit, is that, you know, Katie Simmers is somebody that you're going to want to put on your team. And as I was going through my fantasy team, this is the event where wild cards are just gnarly. Like Vahini Fierro is one of the wild cards. So Vahini Fierro could be going up against the number 1 seed in like the first elimination round.
Mm.
And all of a sudden you got Vahini Fierro versus, whoever it is.
Molly Picklum, maybe.
Yeah. Or Carolyn. Yeah. Who right up there. And who else is there is Carissa Moore. Carissa Moore could be going up against one of the number 1s. Like it's really intense. And guess who's down at the bottom of the seeding on the men? Gabe Medina and Kelly Slater. How would you like to be, I don't know, Ethan Ewing, and, you're facing one of those guys in round 2 or 3. Incredible.
Yeah, Griffin Colapinto would be the number 1 seed right now. So yeah, that's crazy. Who are you aiming or looking at for your survival pick?
Oh, I haven't even given that thought. I don't know if I have John, but I'm pretty sure I don't. It would be somebody obvious like that, like John, or I think I still have Kelly. Maybe I put Kelly on there, but Kelly scares me.
Well, Kelly, yeah, I mean, you might as well use Kelly. You're either going to use him now or at Cloud Break if you haven't used him before, because those are the only 2 events that he's going to be surfing in this year, presumably.
Yeah.
So I'm considering Yago. I haven't used Yago. Yago's in 22nd, so he's in last spot, and I wouldn't use him anywhere else. Maybe I'd use him at Cloud Break, but I was considering Yago or Gabe.
Yeah, I like both of those. I'm just thinking about mindset more than anything. I think at this point you look at everybody, like what about Baron Mamiya? What about Seth Moniz?
Risky.
I think Seth's very risky. I feel like he had this peak moment in Australia, and it feels real, like either 1 or 10. You know what I mean? Like there's no like level, energy cycle. I feel like he's peaked, and maybe, but Baron Mamiya seems like if you haven't used him already, that's a good one.
Yeah, Baron. I mean, I feel like Baron is also a risky pick at times. I mean, I guess he won pipe this year, right?
I mean, if you haven't used him, he's a specialist backside tube rider in, clear blue Pacific waters.
There's no question. There's no question about his ability at that style of wave. It's just competitively, he has moments where he completely, like this last event, Margaret River, where you would expect because of his sunset prowess that he would do great at Margaret River, but he got 33rd place at Margaret. Looks like he got 2/17 in the second and the third event this year. So he's just a little bit hit and miss competitively, but can't take anything away from him. He's ranked number 7th right now. So
here's a wild card for you. Matthew McGilvory.
Yeah.
Didn't he do really well?
He got a 10 last year.
Yeah. And he's one of those guys that's kind of like even keeled competitively. Like, you just kind of don't think about him, and then all of a sudden he's in the quarters and maybe he's in the semis, and you're still not even thinking about him. You're like, oh, there's no way he's going to beat Yago. You know what I mean?
I know. I guess wait until we're a little bit closer and we know exactly what the forecast looks like. That'll dictate it. Yeah. But on the women's side, I mean, look, the women's side's actually way more interesting. Certainly if the waves are big, because Tatiana Weston-Webb being out there this week for this swell is a baller move. And I think that is a huge insight if you're going to be making picks like this and putting money on something.
Totally agree with you. That's a great one. Like, I would be stoked to hear that Carissa Moore was there for this swell. Like,
she
was.
She was there.
She was.
Yeah, she was there prior to the swell. I saw her get a wave out there like a week ago before it got real nuts. So she's putting in her time. And obviously that's in light of the Olympics as well, in preparation for the Olympics.
Yeah, I think they all know, look, it's 8 feet at Chopu. And if we take this thing serious, and I'm sure that's why Tatiana's there as well. I think it's almost more for the Olympics than for this event. They're like, we need to put in our time, and this is the summer to do that.
Think about if you're in the position of those surfers, think about how your lifetime earnings would grow with an Olympic gold medal. Like
Oh my.
if you're at this age where you have sponsorship opportunities, you're still competing on a world tour, and you midway through your career win a gold medal, your earnings post gold medal have to double.
For sure. Especially, if you're in a big market like say Brazil or North America where you can just be on the cover of Wheaties, and be on the, you get whatever, you Toyota, whoever, some massive corporations just like grab that really athletic person that won the gold at Chopu. We've got B-roll we can run forever. We got photos we can put on the cover of the box of her in this big tube.
I mean,
Yeah.
you would go somebody like Tati, let's say, was go from making $300,000 a year to 1.5 next year
Yep.
potentially.
Yep.
Like no joke.
That's who I
So
was thinking too. Tati, and as sort of misogynistic or patriarchal as this sounds, if you're like a corporate marketing guy and you're like, holy crap, that really good looking, gorgeous, athletic blonde just won a gold medal and she surfs for Brazil but she speaks perfect English. I want her. Go get her. We want her as our ambassador.
it's hard to think of a better quote poster girl for a brand than Tatiana Weston-Webb. She's incredible.
Yeah,
She's well spoken, incredibly talented. She's kind of got it all.
she does. She does.
Yeah.
And part of me is rooting for her to, although, I really I want Vahini Fierro to win the gold because I don't know. She's the daughter of a friend of mine.
Exactly. She's a friend of your dad. You're friends with her dad. That's why. I know why.
Yeah.
Well, in a total kind of opposite parallel universe of surf contests, we have the Sydney Pro and the ISA event. There was kind of a couple of talking points from each of these. The Sydney Pro was interesting because it came right off of the heels of the incredibly entertaining and successful Snapper event. And what a difference good waves make. We cannot state this enough, but the Sydney Pro ran in very, very marginal surf at Manly, and it was just, I mean, unwatchable. Did you watch a single heat?
I watched the final replay condensed just to see what happened, and it was it wasn't super exciting. I mean, the guy Jordan Lawler ripped it to crap and just surfed a little obviously better than Alejo Munoz, or I don't know how to pronounce his last
Muniz.
name. Yeah, but who surfed great,
Yeah.
real powerful backside hacks, but the goofy foot Australian was just ripping down the line and he was unstoppable.
Well, there's congratulations, by the way, Jordy Lawler. I think this is the second time he's won this event, and Isabella Nichols won on the women's side. But look, I tuned in periodically and just saw what the waves look like, and it looked like, 1 to 2 turns, maybe, not great. And the 1 or 2 turns, and even the one big air that somebody would do is still not as good or interesting as ones that you see any other day on the internet. But what came out of this was just tons of scoring controversy. And that's why I would tune in is everybody on the internet would light up on Instagram like, oh, Gaetan Delahaye got ripped off or whatever. Chloe Andino's walking up the beach screaming at the judges. Did you see this clip?
No.
Chloe's just yelling from the water's edge, get it right, because I guess he needed a 4.5, and he surfed his final wave, and he's on the beach waiting for the score to get yelled out or to get called out, and he's yelling at the judges to get it right. And it's because I don't think so. No, I think he lost that heat. So it's because there was this heat after heat sentiment of just like, what is happening? Why are these judges getting it wrong? The problem is WSL did not run a heat analyzer for this event, so there's no way for you to go back and really tease it apart. You'd have to watch just the condensed heats, I guess. But I think the bigger issue here is that when you're running in marginal surf and people are surfing, the average score that people are getting is between a 4 and a 6. It's very, very difficult to discern and identify and then justify why it's something is a 6.2 instead of a 5.9. It's just like it's almost a futile effort because it's so subjective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I was on a judging panel that used that sort of WSL format where they really want you to spread your numbers apart. And it sounds like, and what happens, like you say, is it gets kind of jumbled. It gets between 4 and 6 because the waves are just like 4s and 6s.
Yeah.
So at some point, if it doesn't doesn't get to a 5, don't make it a 4.3. Just give it a 2.
No,
You know,
yeah.
like, okay, maybe it's a 4. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of got to spread the numbers apart there. That and you know, it gets jumbled after 4 days. Everyone's like, yep, another 4.5. Well, I gave that one 2 days ago a 4.5, so this is a 4.5. It needs to be a 2 or an 8, even though the waves are shitty.
Yeah, and then once you're making decisions like that as a judge that are subjective and based on your own kind of a,
Yeah,
not some objective criteria, then it's pointless anyways. That's all futile because you're
yeah.
supposed to be making it scientific and objective. And that's where you have Chloe and Dino screaming because these people flew around the world. They spent really a king's ransom to do this thing. And
Well, look, I don't blame. My thing is, look, at that level, surfing's not a sport. You know, it's not a sport. And so if you're going to complain that you had to travel around the world to do this thing, well, you didn't have to. Nobody forced you to do that. You knew what you were getting into. You thought it was going to be different this time?
yeah, exactly. But if the WSL is promoting the fact that they're, going to do their job correctly, we're going to create a contest and create an objectivity and we're going to do it correctly, then as the competitor, you're buying into that and you expect a certain level of that from them. But to our point is it's all pointless anyway. It's all a house of cards anyways, because if you're running at Manly Beach in that style of surf, there's no way to do this objectively.
Therein lies the problem,
It
you know.
truly is. Yeah.
And you got and you know, I don't know how many guys are in the Challenger series, but there's quite a few, you know. So you got a bunch of days. It's not like you can pick the eyes out of a swell and go, okay, let's
No.
do this.
Yeah. Well,
But
the I
you know,
go the
at the end of the
other
day, though, David, I mean, Jordan Lawler won. He probably deserved to win. Like, he probably surfed well enough to win. Like, what happened in round 32 might be horrendous, but at the end of the day, it kind of washed out. And you could say they got it right.
I think a lot of people are saying they didn't get it right though.
Yeah, they lost. Jordan Lawler's not. Jordan Lawler's stoked. He's like, they
Yeah.
nailed it. They did it perfect.
The other talking point was the ISA event going down in El Salvador had quite the tussle amongst the female side, female teenagers, 16-year-olds. Did you see this clip go
did.
nuts? Yeah,
I
go
did. I saw
viral.
Yeah, it was silly.
Basically, what happened was there was a Portuguese surfers were in positions 2 and 4, and there was a Western Australian surfer in the third position looking to get a 2.7 or a 2.4, in fact, right before the buzzer. And she took off on a wave, attempting to get the 2.4 and better her position. All that she needed to do was move from third to second. But the Portuguese teammates, one of the Portuguese was in second place. Well, the fourth place teammate, who ultimately had nothing to lose because she was in fourth place, was looking to protect the position of the second place surfer. So she took off in front of the third place surfer who had priority on this wave. So the third place surfer from Western Oz gets up and riding and does a turn. The fourth place surfer, the Portuguese surfer, takes off in front of her, trying to block her from getting the score, and not just took off in front of her, but put her hands on her and tried to push her down. And when that didn't work, screamed in her face, leaned over, got within like 1 foot from her, and was screaming with her hands pushed down behind her, like, ah! I don't know what she was saying. That didn't work either. And at that point, she fell off the back of the wave, and the surfer who had priority on that wave actually surfed it, continued to surf it, and got a 2.7, which earned her the score. So she got up into the second position and advanced in the heat. And the two Portuguese surfers got bumped down and then ended up losing the heat. It was a really made for a pretty stellar clip. Funniest part about it was a 1 foot wave. They were surfing very, very mediocrely. And I mean, obviously, just for a 2.4 was the attempt, but it was a silly. This is the opposite of maps to nowhere that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where you travel around the world and try to get barreled, like the best waves this was the crappiest waves in the world and doing something that was entirely opposite.
Yeah, I saw that. It was comedic for sure. And in some ways it was kind of entertaining.
It was very entertaining. It was just like, what
Yeah.
is this what we've come to? Like,
Yes, it is.
this is what we've come to.
Not what you and I've come to, but what sometimes trying to find it. It's just, the whole thing's backwards, right? I mean, you and I've spoken at length about this. Really, surfing isn't a sport because a sport requires you score your own points. There's somebody on defense attempting to stop you from scoring your own points. You can't wear leisure pants and you can't smoke cigarettes. If those things occur, then you have a sport.
Yeah. Well, this was the worst part of surfing for me. This is when I saw this, the surfing is horrendous. First of all, no offense to the girls. It was just the waves are horrendous and they're running in crappy conditions. The tactic was bad. Just like in any sport, if you were to see this tactic, you would just kind of roll your eyes. Obviously, because it's physical contact, first of all, in a no contact sport. And then the screaming was just undignified. Then I had an additional thought. The additional thought was nice to see some tenacity from the girls, because I feel like over the history of kind of competitive surfing, one thing that's been lacking on the female side was a real bloodlust. Even when there was world titles on the line, you did not feel like Carissa Moore wanted to rip Stephanie Gilmore's throat out. They were still super friendly in the middle of a heat. And so this kind of that was the only element of this that I felt was kind of like a step in the right direction for competitive surfing.
Yeah. I mean, I there's some small part of us that wants to tip the cap and go, hey, good. This was your option. This was your competitive option and you took it. And it didn't work this time, but maybe next time.
Well, it was just poorly executed. Like the sentiment of wanting to protect your countrymen or whatever is there, but the physicality and the screaming in the face was like the most undignified way to do it. Turns out it was a 16-year-old girl who was the offender in this scenario, and she took to Instagram and actually cried in her Instagram post and said it was in her brightest moment. She committed an interference on an Australian surfer's wave in an unsportsmanlike manner. This was not my goal. I just wanted to help my team, but I recognize my mistake, and I am here to apologize to the surfer and the Australian team. I want to make this video as an example for young athletes that these situations don't happen again. The ISA then made a public statement and said that the Portuguese surfer was disqualified from the event, and her team is actually going to forfeit their points. And the Portuguese Federation was in fact fined as well.
Wow,
So,
they went pretty big.
Laying down the law.
Well, you know what? Let's take a quick break and then we can talk, perhaps, if you want to, about another competition that occurred right in your backyard last week.
Can't wait.
Okay.
Rocketmoney.com/surf. Just this week, my wife figured out she was paying a subscription for Showtime, but then also paying for Paramount Plus, which includes Showtime for free. That's precisely what Rocket Money was designed for. A modern tool that meticulously tracks the details that we easily get distracted from. It's a finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your monthly spending, and helps you lower your bills. It gives you freedom by helping you see your subscriptions in a simple dashboard and alerts you about hidden fees or increases. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/surf. Calm the clutter in your head, simplify the tedium of your financial life, and find freedom through rocketmoney.com/surf.
Welcome back, David. You may have seen that American surfing legend Bethany Hamilton has called out officials in California after organizers of a longboard competition in Huntington Beach were told a transgender surfer must be allowed to compete in the women's division. That California Coastal Commission sent a letter to Todd Messick, who's the founder of the American Longboard Association, and informed him that he would be in violation of the Coastal Act if a ban on transgender athletes was enforced at his event. Bethany said this: California state law allows for males in female surfing events. This is not fair game. I do not support this. And of course, David, when Bethany says something on the internet it makes people stand up. She's widely followed and she's got a voice and people listen to her. Todd Messick went on to say, and again, Todd's the founder of the American Longboard Association. He said, I do want to make clear that our policy is very much in line with the ISA, but right now we're going to support biological males and biological females in their divisions, respectively. If you were born a female, you entered the women's. If you were born a male, you entered the men's. He went on to say, David, you guys can live however and whatever you want to do in life. That's not for me to decide, but it is for me to decide what's fair and not fair for the American Longboard Association. I want to offer an equal playing field for all athletes, and that's the stand we're taking. Now, the ISA updated their policy in May, their transgender policy, and it states that transgender athletes can compete in women's events if the athlete provides a written and signed declaration that she identifies as a woman, and if testosterone levels are less than 5 and whatever it is. For a 12-month period, you have to show lower testosterone levels. David, your thoughts on this? Again, this thing sort of this issue reoccurring, popping up.
Well, so prior to California, was it the California Coastal Commission enforcing this?
Yes.
Prior to that, this bubbled up, and that's how it got on their radar. So Todd Messick got on Instagram. Sasha Jane Lowerson entered this event, I guess, a month or two before, paid her contest fee and entered the event. And that's why Todd then posted an Instagram explaining his stance and that he was not going to allow Sasha Jane to compete in the event. And I guess that made enough news that the California Coastal Commission had to make a ruling on it. And then I've seen Sasha Jane posting about it a couple of other times as well. Todd is, from what I can tell and what he said specifically, is he's trying to create a fair playing field for the vast majority of athletes. You know what I mean? Like, can't be fair to every single human being on the planet, but we need to create fairness for as many people as we can. And so to have biologically female, biologically male divisions is the way that we're deciding to do that. And we're taking cues from the ISA, who's been doing this longer than us. So to me, that you're asking what my opinion is that seems super rational and fair to me. Like, that's a reasonable way to run this event. Sasha Jane's response, I understand, like, the societal kind of importance for her doing what she's doing in the stands that she's making and the direction that she wants things to go. But her response to this feels very personal. Like, her response is, I don't know why people hate me and don't want me to exist. That's what she has said in the midst of everything else that she says those statements. This has nothing to do, this isn't a personal attack. Nobody doesn't want you to, well, I shouldn't say nobody, maybe people do not want her to exist, but Todd did not state that he doesn't want her to exist. I personally, as a fan of surfing, want her to exist. You know what I mean? And I want her to thrive and have a place to showcase her surfing, even competitively. I want all of that to exist. But in this contest that Todd's doing, there isn't room for Sasha Jane to do it the way that she wants to do it based on Todd's rules. And that's okay with me too. Like, it's okay. This isn't a personal attack against Sasha. And I've actually enjoyed watching Sasha's journey. Like, I'm not outing anything here because she's publishing it on social media, but she had sexual reassignment surgery. She's had feminization surgery just most recently down in Argentina. Like, going through all of that and seeing it is kind of interesting to me. And so I'm a part I'm all for her doing what she's doing. I think that her taking Todd's rules as a personal offense is, I guess I would understand why she would, but I just think that that's not what those rules are about. She's misreading those rules a little bit, misinterpreting them.
Yeah, the BBC, their sports division, spoke to two scientists who offer sort of views from the two opposing sides of the two opposing viewpoints, I should say. And one of these people is Ross Tucker. He's a sports scientist who says that physiological differences, David, established during puberty can create significant performance advantages between men and women. And he kind of boils it down to this. The reality is that you cannot restore fairness by lowering testosterone. So therefore, you either have to have fairness by exclusion of trans women, or you must accept a degree of unfairness through the inclusion of trans women. So sports are going to have to make that ultimate decision, right? They're going to have to say, do we want to include trans women, or do we want to protect the women's category and therefore by necessity have to exclude trans women? I can't see a compromise solution. You either have to choose one or the other. Now, the other scientist is a lady named Joanna Harper, and she's actually transgender herself, and she studies the effects of transition on female transgender athletes. And she suggests this: it's impossible to maximize inclusion, to include everybody, to maximize fairness, to be completely fair, to maximize safety in sport. All three of those, you cannot do that without them impacting one of the other. So if we maximize inclusion, it does come at some cost to fairness to the other athletes and to safety of the other athletes. So it was a pretty interesting podcast on the BBC. And I read through some of the transcript, and that's where I pulled that stuff. And I think that's the best way to look at it. Like, let's just boil it down. Right now, you either are include everybody and it's going to be unfair, or you go for fairness, which is what Todd Messick did, and you're going to have to exclude some people.
Yeah.
Or to keep
So-
the integrity of your women's surfing category.
So you said Todd ran this event last week,
Yes, I believe he did. And
and he ran based on his own rules, or did he include?
I think he ran on his own rules. I'm pretty sure, but because I'm looking at his Instagram right now, and he said, look, we never backed down. We
Good.
held our ground, and
I think that's the right move in this scenario. Like, look, the California Coastal Commission can say what they want, but what are they going to do? Come down here and sue Todd? Are they going to prevent him from running his event?
pull his permit was what they could do.
And they didn't. So he stuck to his guns and they backed down. So
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Because yeah, I agree. Like, it probably goes without saying, but him doing this is, quote, protecting the biological female division, as you just stated from those articles. And so I think that's a very noble cause and a right cause. And there will be some fallout by doing that, but that's the decision that he made as a business organization. He's entitled to make that decision. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
Yeah. And you and I've had long, lengthy discussions on this before, but I thought I would bring in those two sports experts who both basically agree. Look, right now, you either protect the integrity of your division or you go for inclusiveness. And they both agreed, we're not going to know for 20 years until we can do a true study on this and determine, is there actually some advantage to a transgender woman in surfing in these women's divisions or not? They won't know. There won't be any way for them to actually have the data to determine that. But right now, it's like less than 1% of the population. And, so you know, it's, I'm
You don't want to
hesitant.
jeopardize, you don't want to jeopardize the livelihoods and the, the sport for the other 99% of the population to make adjustments for a statistical minority. But I understand the importance of having these conversations and to bring them, making the conversations kind of part of our general discourse. I think all of this is valuable. I think the detail, though, like I said, about just kind of reading into Sasha's pleas, a lot of them sound like she feels like she's being personally victimized by this. And I understand why she would feel that way, but I don't think that that is necessarily a healthy way to interpret a lot of these rulings. Like a lot of these rulings they're not personal attacks. They aren't, uh, again, I know
Well,
why she feels this way, but they're not a cry to make you not exist. Like I want her to exist. I want her to thrive. I want her to have opportunities. And so having these conversations might lead to her having competitive opportunities, financial opportunities, all that stuff. But it can't be at the risk of jeopardizing Bethany Hamilton's spot either.
yeah, Joanne Harper, that sports scientist who's a transgender herself, Miss Harper basically states that we need to have this discussion on a 30,000-foot sort of global level and not
Right.
be attacking personally whoever
Right.
that athlete is. It needs to not be a personal thing. It needs to be, here's the ideal. Are we going for inclusion as the ideal? Are we going for category fairness as the ideal? Let's choose the ideal, whatever one we decide to debate. Let's not personalize it and be attacking either Bethany or um, is it Sasha?
Yeah.
Sasha, like, let's not go there. That's silly. That's now we're throwing stones.
Yeah. Well, I'll congratulate Todd Messick for putting together an event, first of all, which is very not easy to do, longboard
No.
event, no less. And so for getting that whole thing up and running and then really facing this thing head on. I mean, he is putting his own face, making, very clear kind of statements, addressing a very controversial, complex, and also fraught politically topic. And so kudos for Todd for not only facing it, but then sticking to his guns and delivering.
Do you know Todd?
Only in passing.
I know Todd very well, and he's a really cool guy. He's a very sweet guy. He's a sincere guy. He means well. There's not a, there's no, he's just a good
Animus.
guy. He's a good guy. He's a
Yeah.
good guy, regardless of, how you feel about his position on this. And I think all of the people that we spoke of are like that. There's nobody here that's trying to draw blood, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, good. Thanks for doing such a good job teasing those top or that the various sides of that issue apart.
David, guess what?
Tell
The
me.
best in or the excuse me, the Icons of Foam honoring Bob McTavish. Bob has selected shapers. He's got
Good. I was
7.
wondering about this.
He's got 7. He only needs one more. So he has Michael Arnall, which is last year's winner. He's got Jordan Brazy. I always mix up Jordan's last name. I think it's Brazy. Okay, so it's Brazy, Ryan Birch, Josh Hall, Grant Noble, a guy named Moon from Korea. That's pretty cool, right?
Hmm.
Axel Lorentz from Pucas there in Portugal, and one more to be determined. And there's
I
one
need
more
an
that,
I need an Aussie in
well,
there.
there's an Aussie that he's been. I don't want to throw it out there because I don't want to but it's somebody that that maybe has made you a board or two.
Hmm. Who is Moon?
I don't know. I don't know who he is, but he's a Korean guy that shapes that's friends with Bob McTavish. So that's the wild card, which I love. This is an international surfboard show. We got guys from Australia, Korea, Portugal, California, the East Coast, with Jordan. So it's going to be good. I'm
Moon
excited
is a
about
cool name, man.
Moon. You got to own that name.
It's cool. I mean,
Just that's his name. There's no like, that's it. It's a one-word name.
There's no surname.
That's it.
Amazing.
Moon.
I love it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how that goes down. But so those are 7 of the 8, and Bob's attempting to get the last shaper involved there. And this all takes place October 12th and 13th at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, the Boardroom International Surfboard Show, and it's going to be good stuff. And boy, booth space is filling up quickly here. So if you're a board builder, get involved. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And you and I will be there in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always fun.
Yeah. Well, look, my must-see moment was the same one as yours. So my must-see moment presented by Trees Wax is Maps to Nowhere that Surfline and O'Neill put together. And you can find it on Surfline or YouTube, or Stab actually has. Stab, to their credit, goes, hey, tip of the cap, we got to talk about this.
Oh yeah, no,
So
it's incredible. Yeah, so it's season 2, episode 3 of Maps to Nowhere.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Anything else, David?
That is all I've got. I'm obviously right on board with you with that being my must-see moment presented by Trees Wax.
All right. Well, look, we've said a lot. We've done a lot. Lots been said here. Until next time, adios and aloha.
Scott, in light of Maps to Nowhere and venturing around the globe, we have waterwaystravel.com with us today.
Heck yes, Waterways Travel. Those are the experts in surf travel. David and I just got back from a group trip of listeners to El Salvador, and that was put together by the experts at Waterways Travel. And I've often said, David, if you're going to travel, especially surf travel, use the experts. And Waterways Travel, those are the experts.
You know what I would do if I were a listener right now is I would email Brian at Waterways or Chris, be like, hey, here's a link to Maps of Nowhere. Send me there.
I don't know. That's pretty fickle. You might end up fishing a lot.
This is where I want to go. But the reality is, look, they have pioneered spots. I mean, look, Waterways has been at it since the mid 90s, and they've pioneered some spots that you and I grew up salivating over for decades and have become really iconic spots now. So they'll send you anywhere, from Fiji, Indo, Central America, South Africa, but they're still in the business of finding lesser known spots as well. So if you want to go somewhere iconic, they'll get you there. But if you want to go somewhere that nobody amongst your friends has ever been, they will get you there as well. You just reach out to them, tell them when you want to go, and they'll kind of help you get dialed. Ensure that you score and ensure that you have whatever level of luxury you need. So you can do it at waterwaystravel.com, and then go to realwatersports.com for anything that you need for that trip or just for your daily surf life. They have it all.
Yeah, look, Real Water Sports, if you're a foil geek like me, they've got incredible foil gear there and some of the newest stuff from the top producers of equipment like Armstrong and others. So, and of course, surfboards and all, like if you need you're going to need a board bag, for your trip, you're going to need a board bag. You're going to need a new board. You're probably going to need reef booties, you're probably going to need like sunscreen. Like you can get all of this stuff just delivered in a big box right to your doorstep. Boom. You can go online right now and just start placing orders. Ding, 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 ding. Push send, and away you go.
Yeah, no joke. Those Channel Islands new, totally redesigned board bags that you and I got, Real Water Sports got a drop of those as well. So that's what I would recommend, because those board bags, never once prior to that bag have I felt 100% confident that my boards would arrive at my destination fully undamaged, but I threw everything in that bag and I was like, I feel complete confidence that this is going to make it there with no problem.
By the way, we had a listener that reached out to me about my upcoming trip to Indonesia, and I spoke with him on the phone. We had a great chat. One thing I would say regarding board bags and Channel Islands board bag, I'm so stoked to have mine. But when you get together with a buddy, like let's say that David and I were going on a trip, one thing that you can consider is take one of your boards and put it in David's bag. And David, you take one of your boards and you put it in my bag. and you mix up a board. So in case, God forbid, the airlines mess you up and you don't get your boards, you've at least got one board that you can pull from David's bag and vice versa. So it's a good way to sort of hedge your bets.
Pro move right there, dude. Great advice. So yeah, so grab those bags at realwatersports.com. And then of course, book your trips, waterwaystravel.com. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.